After United States bombed Venezuela during an operation to oust President Nicolas Maduro, the Trump administration held a press conference sharing the details of what went down in Caracas and what should be the next course of action for Washington. And this includes running the country till transition, reclaiming the Venezuelan oil and maintaining the aggressive military posture. Listen to this.
We're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the flow of gangs and violence to our country. Deadly serious about stopping the flow of drugs and poison to our people. Deadly serious about getting back the oil that was stolen from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Words can barely capture the bravery and the power and the precision of this historic operation.
This operation, known as Operation Absolute Resolve, was discreet, precise, and conducted during the darkest hours of January 2nd and was the culmination of months of planning and rehearsal, an operation that, frankly, only the United States military could undertake.
There's a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now, very happy, but instead he wanted to play big boy. And so now, he's got other sets of problems on his hands. And but I think that the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody, but don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office because it's not going to turn out well.
And for more on this, we're now being joined live by Adrian Calamel from New York. He's a fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute. Thank you so much for joining us in the broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Adrian, what do you make of everything that's happened in the last 24 hours? Now, Trump has said that United States will run Venezuela and tap its vast oil reserves, adding that he's designated members of his own cabinet to be in charge of the country. What are the likely immediate political and security outcomes of this move?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very interesting question and an interesting statement by Trump to say that he's going to send in a bunch of and don't get me wrong, Venezuela does need to have its infrastructure, its ability to pull oil from its vast fields. That needs to be done. As far as running the country, I think we need to look towards that 30-day window where if Maduro is not president, then you go to a general election. Now, you could say having a general election during this time, that may be too soon, time to push it off. When Trump speaks, sometimes it's hard to take you can't take everything that he says seriously. Some of it has to be taken with a grain of salt. And I think he has put too much emphasis on the oil part of this equation. I think he should be looking at the plight of the Venezuelan people over the last 25 years. I think he should also be looking at they are a real, I would say, threat to the United States. They are a launch pad for expansion into the Americas. So I think that's where the focus should be. The whole idea of having technocrats from or individuals from Chevron, wherever it may be, Mobil, Exxon, running the country, that's not a good idea. But, as we've seen, Trump has some of his most skilled negotiators that he claims are skilled negotiators. They're real estate guys working on really critical issues in the Middle East. So we'll have to see on this. I would advise against this, but we'll have to see.
Right, and there are serious questions about the legality of the U.S. strikes and Maduro's capture, especially since the Congress was also not informed of the decision. Now, having said that, how is Washington responding to these legal and constitutional concerns? And is there any credible legal justification under U.S. or international law for this operation?
There is legal justification for the U.S. I mean, he made the specially designated list in 2017. Then he was a specially designated narco trafficker, and then he was designated as a special designated global terrorist because he's he's the head of a cartel, one of the largest cartels in the world. So. And there is precedence for this as well. Manuel Noriega, George Bush, the first Bush, he did this in Panama, where Manuel Noriega was actually a CIA asset at one point, but then he served as the bank and the money launderers for the drug use, for the cartels, and also posed a national security threat to the country. As far as what's being said in Congress or what's being said, it doesn't have to go through a War Powers Act. This type of action, we're not at war, and as far as looking at who split where, you're going to see that people that are Republican are generally in favor of this. People that are Democrats are generally against this type of action. But people have to understand that there is a growing threat in this hemisphere. And Trump made it clear in his speech early on. I think it may have been during his induction speech that there's basically a new Western kind of Monroe Doctrine that is taking place. And the Islamic Republic, Russia, and Beijing, China, can no longer use Venezuela as a playground to operate against the United States' best interests.
Right, and President Trump has linked the operation to tapping Venezuela's vast oil reserves and deploying U.S. oil companies to rebuild the industry. Now, having said that, critics say that this has underscored the economic motives rather than the law enforcement or regional security here. Now, according to you, to what extent is this crisis driven by oil and economic interests?
Well, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I think Trump should have stayed away from consistently hammering in on the oil issue. Now, let's be clear, the oil that was produced during the Chavez regime and the Maduro regime, the money from that and the wealth from that was spread across throughout Latin America to kind of push forward this, what he called the Bolivarian revolution, which was really a socialist revolution. Now, Venezuela needs to rebuild as a country. It is not in good shape. If you look at the infrastructure, not just the oil infrastructure, but I think Trump's message should have been, and I'm not speaking for the president here, but I think his message should have been, we're going to help the Venezuelan people get back on their feet. We're going to help the Venezuelan people. 1/3 of the population has fled the country. We're going to help them rebuild their country so that they can move back into the country using the vast oil wealth that they have. If that was president, that would be the message. I think that takes this kind of the sting out of this, and really puts the focus on Venezuela's oil wealth has the ability to rebuild Venezuela into a wonderful country that has been really run into the ground over the last 26 years by first Chavez, who took over in a military coup, killed 400 people firing rockets on Venezuela, on Caracas, and then onto Maduro, who was nothing more than a union leader of the bus union. So these were individuals that weren't really, one was military, took over in a coup, another was a union member. Both had these socialist ideas. And what it did was it bankrupted the state. It bankrupted it to the point where they did get some help with pulling that oil out of the ground from the Islamic Republic around 2019, 2020. The Islamic Republic was moving, basically, oil products, oil manufacturing materials to help the Venezuelans help the Caracas government pull that oil out of the ground, which they were unable to do.
Right, Aidan, and you've made a very interesting point here that optics do indeed play a very significant role when it comes to the geopolitical landscape. And even if oil isn't the stated objective, does perception alone weaken Washington's moral argument here?
Yeah, I think it does weaken its moral argument. I hate when people, it plays right into the hands, saying that oil is the most important thing, to continue to say this. Now, oil is important for energy security. Ukraine knows this best. Europe knows this in dealing with the conflict with Russia. But at the same point, this should have been one of the messages that's farther down on the back burner. Rebuilding the oil industry for Venezuela so that it can be linked in and connected to the Canadian American oil industry, offering the Western Hemisphere independence. That should be the message, as opposed to we're coming in there and we're going to rebuild it all, or do it this way until we believe you are ready to take it over.
Right, and while there's a lot bubbling on the back burner, the main question that's on everybody's minds is what is next for Venezuela? And we know that the Venezuela Supreme Court has designated Vice President Delcy Rodriguez as the interim president. But Rodriguez insists that Maduro remains the legitimate leader, and she has demanded his release. Now, given this constitutional dispute, what are the realistic scenarios for political authority and governance in Venezuela in the coming days?
Well, another great question, and I believe that's what we're going to see, is that you can remove Maduro, but you haven't removed the apparatus, the state apparatus, the military. The politicians are still in place that are driving his agenda, that believe in his ideology. So removing Maduro is one thing, but then we'll see how the military responds, or the riot police respond, when the people do rise up, because people will rise up, and they are going to rise up to take back their country and take it back from what is seen as an extension of Chavez's rule. So it's going to be very interesting days to come, and obviously everybody's going to be watching this.
Absolutely. And this forceful intervention by the US, it does send a message to Washington's global rivals. Now, what does this stance signal to countries like Cuba, like Iran, which have been a frequent target of US threats? And could we see a similar pressure tactic playing out or being in action in other geopolitical flashpoints as well? Has this set a precedent, per se?
Well, you're asking very good questions. It does send a very strong message in that going after Venezuela, it's really going to hurt Cuba, because it cuts off their lifeline as far as getting oil into the country. It also tells the Islamic Republic that Venezuela is closed for business, and a lot of the global illicit ghost fleets of oil, they do end up in Venezuela or leave Venezuela and are shipped to Cuba or to other countries. It's also going to impact China as well. So it's going to have that impact. And then there's also the fear and the threat that, if there are multiple arrest warrants out for you, and you're on these designated lists, that you could fall into into our hands and be prosecuted in a U.S. court. Looking back to 2022, I remember John Kerry stood there and shook hands with Maduro when he had I forget what it was, a $15, $20 million arrest warrant out for us at that point. So you can see how differently these administrations in the United States are taking the issue with Venezuela.
Absolutely. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops in the coming days, in the coming hours. But for now, thank you so much, Aidan, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your valuable perspective with us.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure.